Welcome to ModiMakes.
What's good, everybody? My name is Modi, this is ModiMakes, and today I'm going to be creating a three-dimensional painting using wood cutouts. So I've done wood cutout paintings on this channel before, but never quite like this. The essential idea is that I'm going to be creating a character and I'm going to be cutting out different sections of this character using multiple layers of plywood in order to give the character a three-dimensional effect and make certain areas stand out more from the background as I want them to. Seems like a simple enough process, though I'm sure it's going to get complicated in different areas. But before I can get to cutting out any plywood and setting up any of the main stuff for the subject of the painting, I first have to start with the background, as always. So I'm going to grab this thrift store wood print that's already been framed. I'm going to start by spray painting the entire frame black. Then I'm going to grab this nice dark forest green color and spray paint the entire background flat with that. Okay, now that we've gotten our background all set up, it's time to start getting into working with that plywood. So I'm just gonna grab one of my sections of plywood and I'm gonna start by throwing a doodle grid onto it so that I can then sketch on the outline for the character that I'm going to be creating for the initial layer of plywood. I'm going to be sticking with a fairly simplistic outline for this, and I think using that simplistic style for this is going to be very visually compelling as well because of all the three-dimensional elements that are going to be laid on top of it. Then we're just going to continue cutting out more and more of the layers as the project needs, and you want to get all your cutouts done first so then you can work on painting them all at once and just kind of do it assembly line style. The second section I'm going to be cutting out is just the body of the bird without the beak, the legs, the tail, or the extra feathers on the top. This way that pushes the beak, the feathers, the legs, the tree branch, and the tail a little bit further in the background and gives the body some heft, some weight to it. We're also going to cut out a teardrop shaped section of the plywood for the wing. Now I wanted the eyeball to stand out on the furthest most layer, or at least parts of the eyeball will be standing out on the furthest most layer. That way that draws you in immediately, and being that it's an eye shape, your eye is naturally going to be drawn to it anyway, so it just kind of helps to reinforce that natural compositional flow that our eye is already going to be following on the art piece. And so I'm going to be cutting out this eye-shaped section of the plywood and then also a secondary circle on top of that. Both of these sections are then going to be cut into halves. I'm then going to be cutting that circular section out from the bottom of it. So that the top half of the eye is going to have all 4 layers of plywood building up, whereas the bottom half of the eye is going to stop on that 3rd layer, and then the actual pupil will be cut out from that 3rd layer, giving it this halved section, creating a separation in depth between the top and the bottom layer, giving it a surrealistic feel. I'm also going to be cutting out a little speech bubble for the bird so that you can hear its beautiful voice. Now that we have everything all cut out and ready to go, it's time to get into spray painting some base colors for these, because being that these are all pieces of plywood, you don't want to paint just directly onto wood anyways, because it's going to soak up a ton of paint if it isn't treated at all. Spray paint will work well as a foundation and as a primer for paints that you want to put on top of it. Plus you can just use some spray paint to get the largest areas of colors out of the way to cut down on painting time later on. all these base colors painted on, it's time to take these pieces over to the studio, and we're just going to use some black paint on a paintbrush to paint all of the edges of the sections with a black color. This is going to operate as the line work like I normally use on my pieces, but since it's three-dimensional, you have to paint the line work on the sides as well as on the top. This way it also masks any imperfections on the cut lines, because like I said before, I'm not the best in the world with a saber saw, so there are some rough parts, and the blacks will help hide all of that. Plus it will separate the layers and make the three-dimensional aspect of this painting more visually clear to the viewer. Then I'm gonna go on top and paint a outline layer on the top of every single section as well. That way the outline is not only on the sides, but is on the top, so even if you're looking at from straight on, you will still have those outline elements. I always use black outlines on all my paintings, so I wanted it to be a part of this as well, and it will also help it connect with the frame better later on, being that the frame is also black. Once we have our outlines in place to separate all the different sections of color, it's time to get into some of the painting for the actual different colors on this character. It's a little bit tricky with this piece because you want to be painting all of these different colors on before you're attaching the different layers to each other. That way you can make sure that you're painting a little bit further out than you normally should be, and you're going underneath the other layer so that it has a clean finish and there isn't any gaps in the coloring you're going to do. So you're just going to be coloring a lot larger sections than you actually think you need to, and putting in all the detail work in now instead of at the end like I normally would, so that everything plays nice together once the piece has been adhered and all the different layers have been brought together. Speaking of all the layers being adhered together, it's now time to get into that section of the video. So to adhere these different layers together, you're going to need a strong adhesive, and you could probably just use wood glue. I'm not going to be doing that for myself personally because I'm worried that the fact that these all already have layers of paint on them, that the wood glue won't be able to soak through those layers of paint and penetrate into the fibers of the wood themselves. So what I'm going to be using is liquid nails, and this is just a much stronger, more chemically based adhesive that is going to adhere to a lot more variable surfaces than your wood glue would, and not need to soak in as far to get a strong bond. So starting with that initial layer that we cut out, I'm going to put a nice hefty amount of those liquid nails on the back of the piece of wood and adhere it to the background, making sure that it's lined up as well as possible on the edges with the frame there and right in the section that I want it to, which is why I already put that piece of foliage into the corner to make sure that I know exactly where that should be. Then it's just a matter of continuing these steps and layering on each layer on top of the one before it, and making sure that you're getting it perfectly set up with the liquid nails as close as you can before setting it down, and making very minor adjustments so that that liquid nails adhesive doesn't spread out underneath and escape the confines of the piece that it's trying to adhere. Then this is going to need to be weighed down and or clamped and left overnight. And once you've returned in the morning and removed all your clamps and your weights, you can just hope that nothing moved around, and in my case it didn't, so it all turned out fantastically and it's solid as a rock. But there were some issues with splitting some pieces of wood during the cutting process, and that lower section of the eye that's painted in black was one of them, as you guys had noticed. While I'm able to line them up and they look pretty much fine on the top, there is a little bit of gap in the bottom that you can see through, and to fill up that gap I'm going to be using wood filler. This stuff is great for just quick patches on wood and stuff like that. Once it dries you can sand it, you can also paint on it and everything. So I'm just going to take a tiny little bead of it and scrape it onto the area underneath that missing section of wood there. Then we bring it back into the studio to clean up any little bits of issues that we had from either spillover on the liquid nails or maybe just areas that we missed to paint in black or different colors, and also to paint over that little section of wood filler there too. Make sure everything is clean and nice. And then we just have a couple extra little sections to paint into the background that was best left until this point to know exactly how large and what areas you wanted to put them. For me, I'm just going to be putting a couple little sections of foliage on the background painted in black so they sit back and look like they're behind the entire subject. And stepping back, this whole thing gives it a very nice sense of depth. 4 layers of plywood on top of a background layer that I've also painted on, giving it 5 total layers of different sections of depth to work with. Well, there you have it, my peoples. My wood cutout 3-dimensional painting is complete, and I am quite happy with how this one turned out. It's been a challenge, to say the least. This has taken a lot longer than I expected to. I'm behind on schedule and everything, and I had a lot of issues along the way with pieces splitting off, or just issues with the adhesives, or various different things that slowed me down in this process and made it a little bit more difficult, but it was a great learning experience, and I'm very happy with how the result turned out. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't show in the video, like the intense amount of sanding that I needed to do to get everything to line up well on the edges and everything, but yeah, I'm pretty tired, but it was all worth it, I would say. But let me know what you guys thought of the piece down in the comments below, and let me know if you have any questions about this video or any other video I've made. I'll be happy to read through them all and respond to them personally, as I always do. And you know, if you like the video, go ahead and give me a like. If you want to see more stuff like this in the future, I probably won't be doing it for a little bit just because of how energy intensive it was just to do this one. But if you want to see more stuff like this, let me know. That would be fantastic. And you know, if you like me, you like the channel, and you want to help support me, the #1 thing that you can do is to subscribe. I really couldn't thank you enough if you did. It means the world to me. And with all that out of the way, and without further ado, let's get in those final shots, shall we?
Thanks for watching.